Sometime in ancient Africa, when powerful demons still roamed the earth, a group of tribal mages forcefully imbued a young woman with the essence of a demon. With that, she alone wielded the strength and skill to stand against the vampires, demons, and forces of darkness. She will soon be known as the Slayer. Hi, I am Midnight, and this is Midnight TV Talk, and today we will discuss the title of the titular heroine, the Slayer, in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. As stated before, a group of magical tribal men known as the Shadow Men forced a young woman named Sania to become the Slayer by chaining her down and infusing her with the essence of a shadow demon. The spell granted Sania superhuman abilities, making her strong enough to fight the variety of powerful demons known as the Old Ones that roamed the earth and waged war during her time. Eventually, her and the other forces of good were able to banish these demons. However, some of the demons would crossbreed with human beings, creating weaker offsprings. This would force Sania to continue fighting until her time on Earth ended. As a result of the spell the Shadow Men casted, a group of potential slayers were created and would be called at random after the current active slayer perished. All potential slayers are young human women and are usually called after reaching maturity, aka when they start to menstruate. When chosen, the new slayer would receive prophetic dreams, usually of past slayers' lives and battles as a slayer. They also gain an intense desire to fight and protect. However, given the right circumstances, a slayer can ignore this calling, as seen when Buffy considered retiring from slaying when newly empowered Slayer Kendra came to Sunnydale. Slayer Faith became rogue after being mistreated by the Watchers Council and being tempted by the evil Mayor Wilkins. Nonetheless, the Slayer is a warrior of good and will answer the call to fight on its side. Faith, when in jail, decided to break out when she found out that the good vampire Angel was turned evil and she was needed to stop a spreading apocalypse. Slayers will also gain an inherent fighting ability without any prior training when called, as seen with newly empowered Donna, who fought off a vampire single-handedly even though she has been in a psych ward for most of her life. Though inherent, even as a potential, a Slayer still must train to master her fighting skills like handling weapons. On top of that, she would gain superhuman strength, speed, reflexes, durability, healing, and senses. A Slayer is said to be stronger than most vampires and demons. Slayer Buffy could single-handedly pick up a troll god's hammer, but the vampire Spike could not when using both hands. Buffy has been seen bending the barrel of a shotgun, barehanded, carrying construction material with ease, and kicking demons and people clear across a room. And unlike vampires, the Slayer's strength is somewhat constant and is more metaphysical than anything. They don't put on more mass when called, can still swim with ease, and can have petite builds and still defeat enemies much bulkier than them. However, when motivated, a Slayer can enhance her strength by sheer willpower. For example, when Buffy was fighting and losing to the vampire Angelus, he taunted her to the point that she became angry enough to defeat him. Slayers are extremely fast as well. Buffy was able to remove her leg from a bear trap before it closed on her after she stepped on and activated it. She also was able to catch a bolt from a crossbow mid-air before it hit its target. She was also able to keep up with a speeding school bus on rooftop and jump on the bus's roof. Slayers have amazing healing factors, stamina, and durability. They can fight off most colds and recover from most common toxins like alcohol quicker than most humans, but they still endure the effects. For example, in an attempt to capture Angelus, Faith injected herself with a mystical drug that caused humans and vampires they willingly let feed off them to become extremely intoxicated. However, because Faith is a Slayer, she was able to fight off the effects long enough to trick Angelus into feeding on her, causing him to be infected with the toxin, and shortly after she experienced the effects of the drug as well. Buffy has been stabbed several times, punched and kicked by extremely strong beings, and seemingly walks it off. When escaping prison, Faith with her accomplice Wesley jumped out of a window and fell several stories onto a car. Faith quickly recovers while Wesley limps off. Faith was punched directly in the chest by a demon several times stronger than her and was still able to recover and fend it off. Even with these physical enhancements, a Slayer still must maintain a level of self-maintenance with proper diet, exercise, and sleep, usually only about 4 hours. If not, they can see a drastic diminishment of their physical strength. For example, on their initial encounter, Buffy was able to fend off a single Toracon, a feral race of vampires. But after not sleeping for several days, her next encounter with the Turrican resulted in her being beaten into a pulp and knocked unconscious. Then, after properly recovering, Buffy was able to beat and dust the Turrican. A Slayer also has enhanced senses, being able to locate invisible enemies and hit targets while blindfolded. Faith was able to avoid an attack from behind by a knife-wielding assassin. Buffy was able to spot a vampire in a crowd with ease, even though she plays it off as him having an out-of-date outfit.
If a particle of...
There's one.
Where?
Right there, talking to that girl.
But you didn't... Whom?
The prophetic dreams that Slayers receive are either memories from previous Slayers or precognitive warnings of upcoming threats. This is because Slayers share a dream space, and if two or more Slayers are alive, they can communicate within this space. For example, Faith and Buffy met in this space when both were unconscious, and Faith delivered a cryptic message.
Yeah. Miles to go. Little Miss Muffet counting down from 730. Great. Riddles.
Slayers may also have low-level mind control, being able to easily rally those around her under her command and leadership. However, if two Slayers are in the same group, this ability may conflict with each other, as seen several times with Buffy and Faith.
I'm still in charge here.
Why is that exactly?
Because I'm the Slayer.
And isn't Faith a Slayer too?
In the comic book Frey, the Slayer Malaka Frey was born with a twin brother who gained the psychic abilities of a Slayer, while Frey only had the physical traits. This made it easy for him to have older vampires follow his lead, even though he was only recently turned himself. The Slayer's blood also has mystical properties. The Master, one of the oldest vampires to exist, needed to drink the blood of a Slayer in order to free himself from a mystical prison. A Slayer's blood is also the only known cure for a poison made to terminate vampires. When Slayers are identified, they are sent a Watcher. Watchers are members of the organization, the Watchers Council, who have dedicated themselves to fighting evil. This organization began with the descendants of the Shadow Men and have since become a legitimate corporation with headquarters in multiple countries. When paired with a Slayer, the Watcher is responsible to train the Slayer in combat, both hand-to-hand and weapon. A Slayer's most common weapon is a wooden stake, mostly because it's used to dust vampires, the most common type of demon, but most are trained in swordsmanship and other close-range weapon combat. There's an emerging kit that is used to allow Slayers to talk directly to the Shadow Men. A Slayer's handbook titled Vampire was made to help educate a Slayer on the world of magic and the supernatural. A mystical slice was also given to the first Slayer, Sania, created by a group of mystic women known as the Guardians. It was forged in secrecy and used to defeat the last of the Old Ones. Once Sania perished, the Guardians took the scythe and hid it from the Shadow Men and Watchers Council, magically embedding it in stone until a Slayer truly needed it. The Slayer's scythe is only called that because of its symboling being a presumably letter M next to a sickle. However, it is more of a battle axe with a wooden stake at the end. The mystical properties of the scythe greatly enhance a Slayer's abilities several times over, and is meant to only be used by a Slayer. Faith, when wielding it, said that it felt like it belonged to her. When Buffy pulled it from the stone, the extremely powerful Caleb began to back away from her. In her first battle using it, Buffy was able to dust 3 Turrican in mere seconds, as opposed to her taking several minutes to fight and defeat one without it. It also seems that a Slayer doesn't need to physically hold it to experience its effects, as in the case of Buffy, who loses it in battle but was still able to defend herself and gain back control of it without losing its enhancements in the process. Like most supernatural beings and magic in general, most humans are unaware of the existence of the Slayer. Most active Slayers tend to keep their identity as a Slayer a secret, probably due to the fact that in the past, once humans learned of the abilities of the Slayer, they were viewed as a witch or evil being and are either attacked or shunned from society. This happened to Sania, who, even though was known to be the one to have defeated the last of the Old Ones, was still feared because of her transformation. Slayers also tend to isolate themselves due to the fact that their calling is dangerous and puts those around them in harm's way. It is unclear when the title Slayer and Vampire Slayer became interchangeable, but is most likely due to humans seeing Slayers throughout history mostly fight vampires. However, the Slayer legacy transcends dimensions. The demon, simply known as the Beast, expressed frustration with Angelus after he brought the Slayer faith to him, and stated that he heard that the Slayer possessed great strength, even though he was on Earth only one other time. A race of powerful beings, simply known as the powers that be, who reside in a heavenly dimension, sent one of their chosen champions, the Inso vampire angel, to protect the newly called Slayer Buffy. After being called, a woman's time as a Slayer is extremely short, only lasting a year to a year and a half, mostly succumbing to a vampire or demon. A Slayer can become a vampire, and when turned, they keep the abilities of a Slayer and gain those of a vampire, as well as vampire weaknesses. When Buffy was resurrected by the witch Willow, the spell disrupted the magic around the Slayer line, allowing the first evil, the embodiment of all evil, to attack it. It did this by eliminating the Watchers Council and began to hunt down all potential Slayers before setting its sights on Buffy and Faith. However, once the scythe was found, Willow was able to tap into its power and empower all potential Slayers on Earth, making them full-fledged Slayers. After the battle at the Hellmouth of Sunnydale, Buffy and her crew set out to find all newly empowered Slayers and reinstate the Watchers Council. In the comic, Buffy led the final charge against the demon, banishing them all and causing the Slayer line to become dormant. Here are some well-known Slayers. The first Slayer, Sania, who was the strongest Slayer because she was directly infused with the essence of the Shadow Demon, making her more feral in nature. Nikki Wood, who was known to have an exceptional long tenure, 7 years to be exact, and is the only known Slayer to have a child, Robert Wood. Though born of a Slayer, Robert doesn't have any inherent abilities of a Slayer. Faith Lehan, who was the last single Slayer to be called before the battle at the Hellmouth of Sunnydale, which she fought in. Buffy Summers, the only known Slayer to have been brought back to life not once but twice. She is the second owner of the scythe after Sania. And Makala Frey, the first Slayer to be called in over 2 centuries after the final battle led by Buffy that drove all existing demons to another dimension. She is the third owner of the scythe. And with that, we have reached the end of this video. Are you guys excited about the Buffy reboot as much as I am? I have mixed feelings, and if you want to know those feelings, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you will know when I upload a new video, and I will catch you guys in the next one.